What we're going to be looking at today is things that we've been practicing in Austin for quite a while. And if you were in the previous session we just were in that Ms. Snow presented in, what I've said about Austin and about animal sheltering and animal protection in general is that the tip of the spear is really animal protection. If you want to not have to kill animals, don't bring them in. And sometimes that's making a decision as to what's good in your community, what's acceptable. And it's been covered in a couple different groups today, but as I was saying, you might have a dog outside on a tether, not the way I would keep a dog, but if it's healthy, it's safe, and it's cared for and loved, that's okay, We know there's animals that live in apartments, sometimes live in houses in crates all day while their owners are gone. Again, not a way I want to keep a pet, but if it works for that pet and that owner and it's healthy and everything's good, then it's okay. So as we're going to look at things today, you've got 3 very different areas of the country. Officer Snow, or Miss Snow, is from Pima County, Arizona. It's a 9,000 square mile area with native tribes lands on it. Very hot, very dry. He's from Cabot. Mr. Wheeler's from Cabot, Arkansas. Again, a little bit different area. It's a more rural area. He's been to several of our Maddie's Fund apprenticeships. But we all have similar struggles when it comes to, does that animal really need to come in, and what do we need to do to keep it out if we can? In Austin, one of the things we started doing a few years ago, when we get word of a hoarder, we start working with that hoarder. If the animals are safe in place and they're not in any harm's way, there's just too many of them, or maybe they're going to have to move, or they're getting evicted eventually, we start working with that person to try to move those animals out to rescues rather than have them flood the shelter all at once. But it even comes down to your daily decisions on what animals come in. I was on a call yesterday helping an officer with a fox stuck in a fence, and she wanted to bring that animal in to the rescue because it had a sore on its tail. Something had obviously been chasing it. I personally would have let the fox go. Wouldn't have brought it in. But because it doesn't come to our shelter, it goes to wildlife rescue, I really didn't care. It's her decision. She's the officer on the call. I was just there helping. So I let her take that animal in. But in my mind, in my experience, that fox was fine. It's a wild animal. She is going to go out there and be just fine where she was at. We have a good working relationship with our wildlife rescue in our city, so it worked out fine. But part of understanding what animals bring in is you have to then prioritize your calls so that you can mitigate bringing animals in that don't need to be in. So for Austin, our largest call volume is stray animals, stray dogs, dogs at large. And we have to always remember that a stray dog is not an unknown dog. It's just a dog not supposed to be, or not where it is supposed to be. And so as that's our highest call, it's also our lowest priority because we're not worried about those strays. By the time we get there, even if we go as it's called out, it's probably not going to be there because we know the dogs are right outside their houses. So as we prioritize our calls, if you're going to push stray dog calls, you're going to be bringing in a lot of animals. You're going to be bringing animals that don't need to be sheltered. Maybe you just need to go knock on the door and talk to people about their dog being loose. And I don't have to do that while the dog's out. I can go back and do that if I know the address. Another thing is understanding returning dogs in the field. It's not just about handing the dog off to an owner and walking away. When I push RTO, because I have two people that work for me right here, I push RTOs in the field a lot. It does a couple things. It gives you an opportunity. Every time you return an animal in the field, it gives you a chance for your officers to talk to them about why that animal's loose. What needs might they have for that animal? Is it simple as a broken fence, or is it an unneutered, unspayed dog that's running around looking for a girlfriend or boyfriend? So if you just hand the leash off and walk away, or you hand them the leash and a citation, we're not gaining anything. You're going to be back out there. So we look at how often are we back at the same house. We look at our recidivism rate. We want to see that we're solving the problem, not just repeating the same thing. So I measure officers on RTOs in the field, but also I don't want them RTOing the same dogs over and over just to get their numbers up. So we have to always look at that. The other thing with RTOs in the field is it saves you money. In Austin, our average time on an RTO is 19 minutes. Average time in the shelter, if they bring 1 dog in or 3 dogs in, is an hour. And that doesn't count drive time. If you've been in Austin at all, there's a bit of a drive time issue. So it's cost effective for me to have my officers not bring them in because A, we solve the problem most of the time, B, it doesn't cost as much, and if we do bring an animal in, we're spending money on that time, but it also is about $40 to $45 a day for us right now for the average medium large size dog, and our average length of stay is around 15 days. So when we keep 1,000 animals out, it's pretty easy to do the math. You're looking at actually $765,000 last fiscal year that we saved not bringing them in. Not that I'm counting. And that cost, as opposed to that 19 minutes of man hours in the field, is $3,700 with my average hourly pay. So it makes easy sense. It's easy math. So if you have police departments reporting, bringing animals into you, maybe you need to talk to the chief about how much money you spend in sending those officers to your shelter all the time, and how much the shelter animals cost. So these are things that we all have to look at, and if you really want to become more and more effective, these are things you're going to have to look at individually. Some of the stats that I collect for Austin are not going to be the same stats that Mr. Wheeler has. So you have to look individually as to what's affecting your intake or what's affecting your officer time, and what animals are you bringing in. Because I just talked to a guy in the other thing, and his issue is not stray dogs, it's feral cats. They're having this huge issue with cats. We're lucky enough in Austin, we're not required to pick up stray cats. So it's not an issue. Where I was before I came to Austin, I didn't have to pick up stray cats. So it's a lot easier to deal with one primary target animal, but yours might be different than ours.
I can tell you also just a little bit about my background. I also worked under Mark for 5 years before I went to Pima County, where I've been the last 2 years. And going into Pima County, I thought I had all the answers. I thought, Austin had it figured out, and I thought our officers were the best of the best. And I went into Pima County, yeah. Well, now mine are. So I went into Pima County thinking we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and the problems we have there are nothing that Austin has. The culture is completely different. Like he said, we have 9,000 square miles to cover. Even something as little as the dogs, I think, are different. The level of dangerousness is different. I think in Pima County, we've got packs of dogs out in the desert, and for the most part, they're not attacking each other. These are dogs that all get along really well. And out here, I don't think that would be the same result. So I think it's important to keep in mind that where you're at and in your zip codes may not be the same as ours, but the end game is still getting to the root of the problem. And for us, like something that blows my mind, Texas loves their wooden fences. It blows my mind. In Pima County, we have cement walls. That makes all the difference in the world with dogs getting out. So, it's just something that I always think about because it's just two different worlds, and there is no black and white answer.
When you walk, if you go to Austin Animal Center right now, every animal that you see there was owned by somebody. There's none of them were running around, no birth parents, dumped, whatever. We have very few animal dumpings, although we did have one last month. It was verified, it was on video. Doesn't happen a lot. But even an animal that was dumped was owned by somebody, right? Because somebody had to dump it. So things I don't allow to be used are like very owned. This dog's very owned. Because the poodle with fingernail polish or the Yorkie with a nice cut is just as owned as the pit bull with a blocky head that's wiggling from nose to tail, jumping all over. So again, this goes back to helping your officers understand what needs to come in. An animal that sometimes looks rough, the number one reason for people to disconnect from a family pet is mange. I come from Minnesota. We didn't have a lot of mange issues. And when I moved to Texas, I know where chupacabras come from. Because mange is horrible. We get complaints here in Austin of mange, even mangy coyotes attract attention. So if you can get community involvement, you don't have to bring that dog in that has mange, because I guarantee you they get another dog, they're going to have mange. There's something in there, depends what mange it is, but there's something along with their care, their next dog's going to have it too. So don't take that dog. We do not ever, and I mean ever, under my watch, take dogs in lieu of citations. Used to be done when I started. We don't do that. If some other entity wants to, like say law enforcement based, they can do that if they want. I don't have control over them, but I want to fix what's wrong that's causing us to be there wanting to write a citation in the first place. I want to let Mr. Wheeler speak to what his needs are because he's in Arkansas. It's a different part of the country than her and I. And you can see our next slide up here. Think about this as you go through it before I start talking about it. But I want to give him a chance to put in what he sees coming into his shelter and what he's done to try to mitigate healthy, well cared for dogs coming in.
Well, we do take cats, okay, until just Monday. Now we have a new community cat ordinance, which we modeled after
Nice.
Austin, Jacksonville, places of that nature. So that part of my life is changing for the better, thank goodness. But what we have to look at is you either have to keep them out or you have to get them out. And it's a lot easier to keep them out. Because once they come in, if you have cats like I do, you have upper respiratory within days. I mean, this 7 to 14 day incubation, doesn't matter. 2 days in, they have upper respiratory. So it's a lot easier for me to have officers, if they have to spend 20 minutes following that dog back to their house. Yes, they could have picked it up 15 minutes earlier, but if I can find out where they live, I don't have to deal with that problem again. Like Mark said, we do not, in my organization, if they get a citation, they get a citation. It doesn't matter whether they own a surrender or not. If it's an offense that needs a citation, it's an offense that needs a citation. Now, we always do education first. You have to. Not everybody understands. We have cultural issues like everybody else does. So we have, economic issues. If it's as simple as giving somebody a leash because they don't own a leash to take their dog out, that's simple. I'll give everybody in my city a leash, and we'll just be happy. But you have to find out why the dog is out. Why the dog is always out. Is it a problem where they have kids are coming home from school and letting the dog out? Well, maybe it's not the parents you need to sit down with. Maybe it's the parents and the children. Okay, so all I can say is do everything you can to keep them out. It's much easier to keep them out there than it is to get them in. We can even go so far as we all have social media. You all work in, how many here are from municipalities or counties? So we have quite a few. Well, each one of those, you have a Facebook for the city. You have a Facebook for your shelter. You have a Facebook for fire department, Facebook for the police department, Facebook for Parks and Rec. Every department has a Facebook page. Well, she's 9,000 square miles. Do you think her officers have time to go everywhere? So why not post the dog is running loose over here? If anybody knows who the dog is. We all have next door if you don't know that, because I get tagged in it 3,000 times a day. So these people are doing us a favor. They're putting out there these people's dogs are running loose. But why are we afraid to do that? Why don't we put it on ours and have the city share it and have police department share it and somebody else share it? Maybe that dog will get home before we ever even get to it. Is it because we're afraid that we're not doing our job? I don't think my job is to pick up every animal in my city. It's not. Public protection first, animal protection second. That's the way we were designed as animal controls. Now, I work animal control and shelter, so I see both sides, but we do have to understand that every dog out there has an owner. And that fat, happy lab that is bouncing on the side of your truck, it has an owner. It hasn't skipped a meal. Dogs don't stay healthy like cats if they're running around for a week. You can attest to that. Your packs of dogs, they're not that broad. Mm-hmm. So why are we doing everything we can to rush out there to get them? Because we know better than everybody else. They have bad owners because their dog got out. We just need to reevaluate that.
I have a perfect example of that too. And again, coming from Austin, I think I was a bit spoiled. But I use social media all the time as an officer. We worked really close with the Lost and Found page. At least I did.
You still get tagged in it?
Yeah. No, not anymore, thankfully. But that's been a hard thing for my officers to grasp, and that's really an internal culture that they've kind of struggled with, mainly because they're paranoid that someone somehow is going to find them on their personal page. So, but all of that is inaccurate. Anyway, so I had an officer on scene trying to catch a Great Dane and a little golden duty thing. Officer gets bit pretty badly on the head by, of course, the Great Dane. So he's got multiple large bites all over his face. I've got 3-4 officers that are drop everything, I'm going to go help, which was great, but nobody was attempting to locate an owner. So from a meeting that I was absolutely paying attention to, if I have any bosses in here, I went on social media and just kept looking at the lost and found page, and by the time they had backup to them, I had already located an owner. So the one dog that didn't bite was returned. The other dog, unfortunately, did do its quarantine at the shelter, but again, returned home after. So, I don't think unfortunately, any one of the officers would have gone on social media and found that owner. It's something super simple that I did from a meeting.
In Austin, we obviously with pushing RTOs, we've done things like this slide suggests. We have officers that will do microchipping in the field. I don't require it of all the officers, but I certainly appreciate those that will do it. We have one officer, I think she did like 40 in a month or something. She's wicked fast at doing microchips, and she does it safely. We do microchip clinics for free. It's all done for free. We register them at least on our Chameleon database. They can register it wherever they want on theirs. I think with our new chips, they automatically register. And return in the fields can give you so much support from the community, and they can really get you what I call the ice cream truck mentality. Any of you that ever hear me speak, I talk about this. I want people to come out of the street to help us find the owner of that dog. I want people to wonder why the dog truck's in the neighborhood, not so that they can throw rocks at us, but so that they can help us find their neighbors, dogs, home, whatever. Sometime last year, I was out in the county, and I was chasing a dog I'd chased a couple times. And a lady drove up next to me, wanted to know what I was doing, and I told her I was trying to locate the home of this dog I'd been following around so I could talk to the owner about proper containment and see if they need any fencing help. There was a little bit more conversation than that, but then at the end of it, she said, well, that's good, because I was going to get out and fight you. Well, you're way too cute for that. But anyway, I'd have been game, It was early. We could have gone a couple rounds, see how it goes. But, I mean, that was her mentality, that she wanted to fight with the dog catcher. And I'm only a dog catcher on a good day. Man, I'm getting old. I don't catch that many anymore. But so we're trying to change that mentality. And there are neighborhoods where Dave Ackerman's sitting here in front of me and Rebecca. There are neighborhoods when I started that we didn't go in all the time without police in Austin, especially at night. And now we pretty much come and go, and we don't even think about it. There aren't any neighborhoods I know of that I wouldn't go into. But a lot of that's because we've changed the outlook of the people around us. When you're looking at animal control and you're thinking about what you're going to bring in, he mentioned labs. I come from Minnesota, and the bane of my existence was black labs. And everybody would call me and say, do you have anything that's not black? Now I live in Austin, and every other metro city has pit bulls everywhere. So when I see a black lab, I'm immediately rubbing its cheeks and wanting to pet it. My wife thinks I'm crazy when I do that, because for years I didn't like them. Fixing fences, allowing officers to stop and fix a fence if they want to. That's time that's worth spending. If you just throw a dog over a fence and you're not checking to see where it came from, cool, you get to chase the dog again later. But we don't want to have to be catching dogs over and over, and we don't want to leave dogs into dangerous situations. So if we can get somebody a gate latch or a spring or fix their fence, we're going to do that. When I started, our fencing program was only for the city of Austin. They had to be spayed, they had to be neutered, they had to be updated on shots. There was a long form you had to fill out, you had to qualify, and we just started doing it to the whole county. It's our program, we can do whatever we want with it. So we don't just willy-nilly give out whole fences to people that can afford to put their own up, but if somebody needs an enclosure, then let's give it to them. And if they can't, here's another thing, if you have fencing programs, don't put a ton of rules in place. City of Austin's a high rental area, so not a lot of people own houses. If you're from California, I guarantee you live in a city with mostly rental. So when you build your free fencing programs, you need to also build in the fact you might need to buy freestanding outdoor kennels, the runs you buy from Home Depot or whatever, and be okay with that. And I'm also okay with the fact that if we give one to somebody and 5 months later they move and they sell it on Craigslist, I really don't care. As long as we didn't have to chase that dang dog around the 5 months, I don't care. The other thing we have the ability to do here that not every state can do is, or every county in Texas, we do home quarantines as much as possible as is safe. We only have a finite number of kennels that are in our rabies observation. For those that don't know, Travis County leads the nation in non-negative rabies results because we have these lovely bats, and we also have skunk rabies. Mm-hmm. So rabies is still a huge risk for us. It's still a big part of our life, but at the same time, we know that dogs do better at home. We know that cats do better at home. So if they have not violated any state or local ordinances, we do everything we can to make sure they can keep that animal at home for the rabies quarantine period. And that's a huge help to us because sometimes when dogs are out of sight, out of mind, and maybe it's the second or third time they bit somebody, now it's at the shelter and they just never come back. It's easier. So if you don't create that separation, you don't have that dog end up staying there. Plus, if it bites 2 or 3 times, we don't want the dog anyway, because then it becomes a different discussion. So when you move through some of the hardships and things that go on in life, I recently, within the last year, started running our pet resource center, and I had a little epiphany because I was being a jerk, and I was judging some lady who came in and said she had to get rid of her pets because she was moving in the morning. I think she had 3 dogs. And I've been doing animal control a long time. I know how long evictions take. We've all been on those eviction calls. We've done animal control where you go in and grab everything that they left behind. And so I followed the lady out and I said, I know that you didn't just find out you're getting evicted today. And she looked at me and says, well, no, I've known since I got served papers 35 days ago. She says, but I thought somebody would help me. I felt like a jerk. Because here this lady's last hope was for family or friends or somebody to step forward and take these animals from her before she had to show up at our threshold. She really was getting evicted the next day, and she was broken up about it. So I needed to step back and think about where that might be. So these are things our officers need to pay attention to. If they're talking to somebody and they're talking about life is hard or, gosh, I might get evicted because, I've had issues with my dog getting out. Well, that's where my officers have the power to make a decision. They can call the lead or supervisor and say, hey, this person needs some help. We need to do something because otherwise we're going to end up with that pet. Was it you was talking about being in somebody's house with the ceiling falling in? There was a hoarder situation. I don't know who it was.
No, but I've been there.
You walk into some of these hoarding situations or neglect situations, cruelly as we're looking at on the slide here, and you see there's other things going on. Maybe a roof falling in. We had one lady years ago, their raccoons had fallen through her ceiling.
Been there.
So sometimes they need social helps that we don't necessarily give, but we can help them by getting them hooked up with the right people, whether it's a mental health person. City of Austin has mental health law enforcement officers assigned to each district, and the EMS has mental health officers and officers assigned to help with social work for the homeless population. So you got to know who these connections are, because a lot of times you can help with the other problems. They're actually much bigger than the pet problem. Pet problem goes away, and all of a sudden they don't need you there all the time. So evictions are a hard one. Again, keep in mind the last thing they're going to give away is that pet. They'll give away their car, their furniture, their tools, maybe their kids, I don't know, but that pet is dependent on them. It might be the last thing they have that reminds them of their previous life. So don't be surprised when they're saying, yeah, I'm getting evicted tomorrow. Maybe they really are, and you do need to take that animal. Quite often, if we can find somebody else, Dave and I have made many phone calls for people trying to figure out if there's family or friends that could take this pet. For Austin, with hospitalization and death, we just had a call last week. Travis County, some guy had died, right? Cats. And they want us to come out and take all these cats. Well, Dave, being a good supervisor, drives out there and says, A, they're his. If he has family or friends, they need to take them. Figure it out. And B, they live outside, not our problem. There was a colony that he was feeding. But we always want to try to reach out to family and friends first before we rush in and take that animal. Maybe we need to transport it for them. I'm happy to do that. But you don't necessarily, just because somebody's in the hospital, we don't have to scoop up their pets. Let's see if there's a neighbor or if there's a landlord or somebody that can come in and help them. Because, again, you don't want to create that separation. If they're coming home from the hospital and it's like, well, you know, I'm in crutches, not having the dog probably be easier, you're giving them that opportunity to separate from that animal that isn't necessarily required. You guys have anything?
No, I think, again, the contrast between Austin and Pima County, Pima County has a lot of retired folk out there. So our hospitalization and death is unreal.
Common.
Yeah, I mean, it's unreal.
Well, and I'll speak from a small city, because my city is much smaller than both of your areas. 9,000 square miles and close to 1 million people, or a little over 1 million people, and I have 30,000 people. Okay, so the resources that you're discussing, you know, with the mental health officers, things of that nature, we don't have those, but we have others that every community has. Every community has churches.
Yep. Every
community has outreach groups, which you should know who they are. You should know your outreach groups, your churches, your newspapers, your, you know, everybody. You should have a list and phone numbers. I promise you, there's not a church in my city that wouldn't step up to help somebody pay a pet deposit or pay rent for a month so they don't get evicted, or so the animals can stay there for the month until they found owners. Who might come in and help the family on a deceased person and care for the animal until they come. So there are people out there. Doesn't matter the size of city. You just have to realize what you have available to you. And there's always something available. We get stuck in this, well, we don't have the funding.
Right.
Or, I mean, nobody has the funding. We'll just throw that right out there. There's not a single person or group in here that has enough funding to do everything they want to do. They don't. But that's why you have to know what you can do. And if you can't do it, admit that and go to folks who can.
And on that point, if your shelter is struggling with funding, quit bringing animals in. Figure out resources outside. Find somebody else to pay the bills. Like he said, churches, a lot of times we get stuck in this, well, we work for the city or the county or whatever, we can't deal with churches. They're happy to deal with you. In Austin, it's a heavily Hispanic area. We have a ton of Catholic churches. And so if you need Spanish speakers, you contact the diocese. If you got something coming up where we need Spanish speakers at something, we can contact the Catholic Diocese of Austin and they'll find somebody. And they'll find people that will do it for free quite often.
Something we do in Pima County also is we get a lot of evictions. It's just, I mean, again, it's a different world. But our Pet Resource Center has boarding options. So we contract with a local boarding facility, and we can offer and pay up to 2 weeks of boarding for these people that are like, you know, in between housing, things like that, that we don't have to take the owner surrender. We can figure out another option for them.
And that's something that, you know, a lot of people, like we talk all the great things we do in Austin. I'd love to be able to do that. Right now we can't. We do house homeless people overnight if they have weather issues. And just a little anecdotal story of that, we have a man picked up his dog's name is Little Bit. Picked up his dog a lot. We all know the dog by sight.
Picked him up twice.
He liked us so much he moved to the trees right outside the shelter. And then he has bad health issues. So every time we go in the hospital, we'd end up with his dog. And more than once I've woke him up on the bench to make sure he was still alive. But the incredible part is last spring, I think it was about a year ago, we had a pretty severe weather roll through, and there wasn't we weren't prepared for it. It kind of came out of I know weather shouldn't be that hard to predict. But anyway, I got a call from our evening lead, and he said, you know, Little Bit's owner's here wants us to watch the dog for him, and then he's trying to seek shelter for himself because of the high winds and lightning, and he wanted to know if he could give him a ride to the shelter. And I said, well, absolutely, you know. So here our animal control truck wasn't needed to house or to haul the dog because he walked up, so Little Bit could stay overnight. But then my officer took him to a shelter, and I mean that's a huge trust, you know, for this homeless person who's endeared himself to all of us, but that he trusts us so much.
And did you catch what Mark said, though? Every time he went to the hospital, they gave the dog back. Okay? How many communities across this country, we all deal with homelessness, even my little 30,000 population have homelessness, folks on the corner begging for money with their animals. And how many times are we blasted on Facebook or any other social media and saying, why do y'all allow him to keep that dog? Why do you allow that them to give that dog back? Well, that's all that person has. We all know there's a lot of mental health in the homeless. So why would you take the only comfort that person has? These animals aren't mistreated. I've not run across one yet on a homeless person who's mistreated. So why are we taking them? Why are we not allowing them to happen? Because we think they're not being taken care of? We have to take us out of it. Take our emotions out and allow these people to keep them. But thanks, Mark. I appreciate you saying that because that's good.
Well, and you think about it, I handled a bomb dog and a drug dog, and those dogs loved going to work with me every day. Every day they were with me. Staff at work where I worked at the time were jealous because they couldn't bring their pets to work every day. You know, and here we are at a shelter. We can't bring our pets every day. I have several. I know Dave's dog would love to be at the shelter every day. Not. But anyway, so on neglect and cruelty, this is where you start walking a line, and you gotta really, again, as he said, we're going to go with public safety first, and then animal safety. So if we have, in the city of Austin, we have a neglect ordinance. So our officers can investigate neglect, and the whole reason that ordinance was put into place is we're trying to stop any neglectful behavior from becoming cruelty, which in the state of Texas rises to a criminal level. So for all of the city of Austin, we have 2 commissioned officers for the Austin PD that investigate cruelty, and then 1 civilian investigator. So there's 3 for the city of Austin, and I think maybe in Travis County there's 1 or 2 that probably don't really want to do it. They're just assigned to it. So if we can get in and stop neglect and deal with neglect quickly, and neglect for the city of Austin might be leaving your dog out on a patio that faces the west in the afternoon, right? It could be your dog being out on a tether because we have an anti-tethering, and it could just be you're not treating the mange that you need to treat. So all of our officers, we have a tethering neglect officer. It's actually a resource officer now, but all of our officers run those calls. So if it gets cold out in Austin, which here is like 40, you know, if there's rain and 40 degrees, we're going to hike up any neglect without shelter that come in to priority 1 calls. The rest of the time, they're probably a level 3 call. But if it's cold and wet or really hot, we're going to elevate those. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go grab all those dogs. It just means we're going to go check on them and see what they need, what they might need. A few years ago, we had freezing rain. I don't know what month of the year it was. We had freezing rain, horrible, horrible weather. The only people out driving around were us. And we delivered straw. I went and got bales of straw so we could go put it and stuff it in people's dog houses. It wasn't that long ago, probably in this city. It was before, you know, they might have just taken those animals. It's not unknown for us to go way out of our way to help somebody out. You know, even if they need a dog house and they need it today, my officers can come back if we have any and grab one and take it. They can take that time. Once we get to the level of, you know, where it's a higher level than that, where we're going to involve the police officers, and we're going to be ready to take that animal on a court order or whatever. But we're not going to jump in like a lot of places do. We do an animal protection Maddie's Fun thing, and I'm amazed. Quite often, students will come to the class and they'll be bragging about the 75 cat horde they just took care of. They just went in and snapped them all up. And then the first thing I ask is, what condition were the cats in? How many died? And if they say none, or if they didn't find dead ones, why'd you take them? There's no reason, you know? My first hoarding case ever was in Minnesota. We went in and I took like 9 dead dogs out of a duct taped together trailer houses. No water, no heat. Dogs died probably from freezing, and then they ate each other. I think I took 3 live dogs out. And then we found another shed with some other dogs. So we took them all. They got a court order. They got charged. They were ordered to never own dogs again in that county. They moved 1 county over and started doing it again. So we know from hoarding, from the mental health aspect of it, if they hoard now, they're going to hoard again, especially if you take the hoard right away. You're always better to slow release a hoard and get them the mental health needs they need. Otherwise, they're just going to do it again.
So a little piece off of that, sorry.
It's okay.
Jumping in before we get to that cruelty aspect. Something that we're doing in Pima County this year alone, and it's not even March yet, we've taken in almost 300 animals from hoarding.
Lucky.
Yeah. So on average, I probably have about 15 hoarding calls holding. So obviously we can't impound everything at once. That would be, detrimental to the shelter. And oftentimes we don't need to. But what we have proved is that there's 100% recidivism if you go in and remove every single animal from these people. It doesn't work.
Do you know the average age of your hoarder?
62.
So what did she say? They have a high retirement community, right? And we know nationally, most people that hoard, statistically, are women above 60. So, and it also runs in families. So she's in a high retirement community, so she might have a far bigger hoarding problem. I hardly had any hoards in Minnesota.
It's unreal, yeah. So something that we're doing, we're working with our health department to create a hoarding task force. We've hired 2 public health nurses that will go in with my hoarding team. They will go in with probably code enforcement, with the public health nurse, and get to the root of the problem. I already do manage intakes on almost all of my hoarding cases, except for the extreme cases, because it's really the only way that we're going to get to the root of the problem with these hoards.
Also, if you're dealing with hoards or any mental health issues and you find out the person you're dealing with is a veteran, Veteran Services is a huge help for that. They have a lot of, with all the veteran suicides and stuff, they've really pumped a lot of money into mental health for veterans. And quite often a veteran speaking to a veteran is much more effective than me, who's never served anywhere except in public government or municipal government. So that's another aspect, another help that a lot of people don't think about. Meals on Wheels is where probably most of our hoarding discoveries come from. I was just talking to a guy in South Dakota that does animal control up there, and he said every hoard he's ever had has come from his Meals on Wheels guys, because they're in the houses, and they see the animals and the people declining, and then they'll report. And quite often they've known about the hoard for a long time, but they don't say anything until they start seeing either dead animals or declining health of one or the other. So you know those people that do those public services, and help you by letting them know what to do sooner rather than later. If any of you have any questions on this in the meantime, I'm not positive we'll have a ton of time at the end, but you can certainly ask if you have any right now.
And knowing your senior services, like you were explaining, I'm fortunate and cursed at the same time. I run actually animal services, and as of 5 months ago, I also run the senior services in my city. And that is where a majority of our neglect cases come from. My drivers for the Meals on Wheels, my drivers for the bus routes, my folks checking on our seniors is who we get most of our neglect cases that don't turn out to be neglect at all, just education and mental health. So,
Or neglect versus cruelty,
Right.
correct.
which is a big difference.
There's a huge difference there. So get to know those folks, and they can hopefully curb this before it gets too bad.
Obviously, what you see on the slide here, this is not neglect, and I would hope your officers would know the difference. But we just had this discussion the other day at a meeting at Austin. We had a person give a presentation, and she was very concerned about the fact that there were several animals in the last, I think it was 60 animals on average that are listed as elderly and got loose once, and we gave them back, and she wanted to know why. And they were called in as injured. So quite often we'll get elderly dogs that, they have the skinny butts. They're not retaining, muscle mass anymore. They might walk a little stiff because their hips are bad, and they'll get called in as an injured or as a neglect or cruelty. And, it can be very offensive to a person if you show up at their house and you say, hey, we got a cruelty call that you aren't taking care of your 21-year-old German Shepherd or whatever it is. 15's old for a big dog. And so you want to be careful how your officers approach that. And obviously, if they see this is well beyond. This is what you see.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but the little blue and white pitty right there, those are not nails on that right front arm.
Those are bones.
So she obviously had her leg amputated. She's in a great home now, but yeah, that dog was found in a yard. The emaciated dog there, the little shepherdy thing, was found after a dog died inside their home. That was their second dog.
So you know if this is going on, there's something else going on in this house. But again, it's beyond my ability to help them anymore. We're going to help the animal at this point, and somebody else needs to deal with that thing.
And that's a lovely horde house on the corner there. Oh, there I am.
So this is Officer Snow. Who is this one? I don't even know.
Come on.
Oh, I can't tell from that view. He doesn't work for me anymore. Doesn't matter anyway. He's a sheriff's deputy now. Again, this is where somebody had an emergent care. We had cold weather, obviously. You can tell by Snow's dress there. But I want my officers to have the ability to just go deal with this and not have to put it off, not have to make another sequence. Just go get what it is they need. If you have the ability to either reach out to Boy Scout groups, are a great place if you need dog houses because they all have a project they need to do. Churches, again, will help donate money, food, bedding. At one point during Hurricane Harvey response, we ran out of sheets, and somebody knew somebody that worked in a hotel, and within about 2 hours, we had a box truck full of old hotel sheets that came in really handy, which I think we still have about 10,000 pounds in a storage crate, because we will need them again. We want to do things that are, again, I hire officers that have soft skills, that can talk to people in a nice way about, we live in Texas, your dog always needs water. It doesn't always need food, but it absolutely has to have water every day, because it might have been 24 degrees this morning, but it could be 88 by this afternoon. Do we care if a dog house has a flap on it? Probably not, but we do care that the dog at least has shelter that it can choose to go into if it wants to. You were going to say something?
I was just going to say we're under 5 minutes. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
Three now.
3 minutes, there you go.
I think too, just from like the officer's standpoint, and really, I think that the way to really control or really look at what you're impounding is your priority levels, your emergency levels, and anything that's like that, a dog house, stuff like that. You guys need to be able to offer those resources and get to the root of the problem and not just take, which is what animal control has been for so many years.
Well, because you want friends in the community. Mm-hmm. You want the folks to call you when there's a cruelty case. You don't want them to be upset with y'all. Why? Because all you're doing is taking animals because you just want more money. We've all heard that.
I just want the money. On
impound fees, the only reason why you're taking animals is because you want more money. Okay? So why put yourself in that situation? Make friends in the community. Take the dog back to the kid who's crying. Take the dog back to the parent, to the grandmother, to the mother, to the father. Take them back. None of your budgets are dependent upon your impound fees. If they are, you either are really small budgets or you're doing some really big impound fees. I can tell you mine's not even, it's just negligible. And my city would be fine without that part of the budget.
Any questions before we're done here? Comments? Yes, sir.
I work in Taos County, which is 6,000 people. It's not ski season. But we are right across the street from the Pueblo. We have many Pueblo dogs that end up in our care, and we honestly don't know what to do with them. The war chief is more than happy to work with us, but the dogs don't get licensed, they don't get shots, they don't get immunized, because it's not part of the culture. Any suggestions?
I think that we have something similar. We have tribes, within Pima County. One of them we contract with, the other we don't. And it's important to have your contract really spell out what you will and won't do, because you can't just have them keep bringing them in. it's a different culture, and you know, like for us, we don't go on the reservation at all. But at the end of the day, I do think they are probably only bringing us maybe 5 dogs a week, which, you know, is probably 5 dogs too many. But again, you're dealing with different culture, and yeah.
I dealt with it in Minnesota. I had the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe in my county, and I too did not go in. They're limited sovereignty nation. What happened there was a friend of mine started working for him, who was an animal advocate, worked for him under a different, as a community service officer, and he found hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants and started getting spay-neuter services in. There is a huge group in Minnesota that does spay-neuter on tribal nations, all through grants and giving. So if you have tribal nations, and almost every tribe now has a grant writer, you got to get in their ear and tell them that they have a pet issue and try to help them understand how it will help their quality of life. But it can be very hard because it is a different way of life. But I will tell you, when I moved here from Minnesota, I was told that a certain people group weren't going to spay and neuter their dogs because that's just the way it was. There was no value in them and whatnot. I think it's a study out of Denver came out a few years ago, and it showed that the #1 people group to take advantage of services they offered was the Hispanic group. And that was the very group I was told wouldn't listen, didn't want to talk to us. And by and large, most of our spay-neuter outreach here is accepted readily by our Hispanic citizens. There's no question about it. It's not that there's any machismo to it, as I was told when I started. So some of that is what Kristen Arbach talked about earlier, getting your own barriers out of the way. And just, you got to find that there's going to be an advocate in the tribe somewhere. There's somebody in the pueblos that do care about those dogs running around. And the other thing is, they may not see it as a quality of life issue because they're fine with their dogs being community dogs. Dogs don't know property lines, right? They don't know boundaries. I suffered the same thing in Minnesota. They'd come off the res, now they're my problem. But I couldn't even legally go on the reservation to give them to them. You know, I had to meet an officer to give them to them, even if I knew whose dog it was. So there's a lot of roadblocks put in, you know, legally, but we just have to find somebody on the inside quite often is the easiest way. That's what solved it for us and where I was from. But she deals with it, like she said, you got cooperation from one, but not the other.
We probably have time for maybe one question or so. Anybody else? I do have one. How do you get... I'm from a rural area, and some of our ACOs are maybe, I would say, hardwired in old-fashioned thinking. And what I've been learning about most of all these ACOs are on the same track of future and changes and changing the mentality and mindset. How do you get someone on board that...
Here, can I handle that one? Mm-hmm. I'm the president of the Arkansas State Animal Control Association as well. And I will tell you that unfortunately a lot of our rural communities in Arkansas, which I'm assuming across the country, our ACOs are part-time ACOs, part-time water department, part-time street person, whatever needs to be done. And a lot of those rural communities, they show up to work and they're given a catch pole. And they're saying, go do it. Training is the only thing that's gonna fix that. Texas has a wonderful training academy for their ACOs. Arkansas is working on ours to make it more animal friendly. ACOs are not typically set out in the world as animal friendly people. They want to be, but they're hired law enforcement and code enforcement is what they are. So we have to educate them on, as you say, you hire the softer side.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, that means you have to, customer service. You have to be able to tell somebody where to go, but make them look forward to the trip, so to say. So they have to be happy when you leave them. All of my officers, even if they write a citation, their goal is to get a handshake and a thank you at the end of it. Okay? It's not because they did any favors to them. It's because they educated them. They treated them like human beings, which a lot of times officers don't. But that's only going to come through education, and in your rural communities, it's usually going to be pushed through City Hall, through your city council, your mayor's office, and public.
I do talk about the culture of APS tomorrow too, so I won't
there you
answer
go.
because it's a whole slew of stuff.
Well, thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank y'all.